Hello and welcome to Moonshots. We are back again with our how-to series, and today it's all about rapid prototyping. And I can tell you, when I discovered rapid prototyping, my mind was like blown. It answered a lot of questions. It's like the super cheat for building new products. And today we're going to dig in and give you everything you need to know on rapid prototyping. We're going to give you a quick breakdown on the history. We're going to define rapid prototyping. We're going to give you a little bit of a checklist that you can use when you're prototyping to make sure you get it right. And then we're going to give you some habits around how to ideate, how to be curious, how to test, how to learn, and in the end, how to get great results when you're testing with users. Because in the end, they can give you the ultimate insight. They can tell you if this is a product that they need, they want, they desire, is this solving a problem for them? And that's why it's so good to rapid prototype, because you can work that out before you build your final product. If you rapid prototype, you'll be on your way. Let's get into it. The rapid prototyping playbook, that's it. How to test your product idea before you build it. And that really is the key with rapid prototyping. We can avoid making this enormous, costly, timely mistake of building something that nobody wants. Famously, Eric Ries, the author of Lean Startup, talked about spending many years and millions of dollars building a product that nobody wanted. Well, rapid prototyping is very much part of Lean Startup and design thinking, and it's very much part of helping you work out what people really want and not having to actually build the entire thing in order to work that out. So let's get in there. So I really want to get you thinking. I want you to think about how many prototypes lay behind the success of things that have really changed the world. And check this out. You might be very familiar today with James Dyson, or Sir James Dyson, and his brand Dyson, that have vacuum cleaners, hand dryers, you name it. If there is air moving, they have mastered it. And when he originally started on his adventure to recreate the vacuum cleaner, he built 5,127 prototypes in his back shed over the course of 15 years. And actually here on screen, you actually can see one of those prototypes. But he built these continuously until we ended up with the final product that we all know and love today. My point here is it takes a lot of work to prototype to get things right. But the more you work on it, the more you prototype, the bigger your success chances become. I mean, think about it, 15 years, 5,000 plus prototypes, and now he has a multi-billion-dollar brand. Let's go back further in time and let's look at the Wright brothers, the pioneers of flight. I've just picked out a number. They're famous for having spent years and years and years modeling their prototypes. But they spent and invested the time to build over 200 prototypes for the wing shapes alone. I'm not talking about the engine, just the wing shapes that would have the right balance, give them the right acceleration, velocity, you name it. Over 200 prototypes of the wings alone. And what's really cool about this is you can see that you may have heard about prototyping with tools like Adobe XD, InVision, and Figma, and using those for modern applications. But here's the crazy thing. Prototyping has been around for ages, and it's at the heart of some of the biggest technology revolutions that we have known. And so let's bring it home. Let's talk about the light bulb. Thomas Edison, famous for saying that it took over 10,000 prototypes to get the light bulb right. But think about how that's changed the world. There's a quote here that I really want to read to you that encapsulates his thinking about prototyping. I think is very powerful in terms of how to think about testing and learning when you're building a product. Here we go. This is what Edison said. I have not failed 100 times. I have not failed once. I have succeeded in proving that those 10,000 ways will not work. And here, this is kind of the insight that worst case scenario, if your prototype fails, at least you know what not to do next. And the most talented people say, okay, what did I learn? And what am I going to do next? And that opportunity is in front of you right now to learn how to prototype. So it's all going to be about prototyping. And prototyping is this huge theme that we've discovered doing the Moonshots podcast. In fact, we've seen not only the likes of Jonathan Ive, Steve Jobs, Eric Ries of more recent times, but what I propose to you is it's Sir James Dyson, it's the Wright brothers, it's Thomas Edison. You can even go right back into the history. Leonardo da Vinci used prototypes as well. This is what happens with the Moonshots model. We look for the patterns of success in people that have done amazingly bold and ambitious things. And if you go to model.moonshots.io, you can see all of the models, and rapid prototyping is one of our favorites. Okay, so there's actually kind of three types of prototypes: diagnostic, interaction, and the third one is a journey-based one. I'm going to break each of these down. I'm going to give you the chance to understand how each of these can help you. So the first one, a diagnostic one, super early stage in your new product idea. You might conduct an interview. And let's take getting a mortgage as an example here. You might say to your user, and this is the key bit, say it to your user, ask it of your user, prototype with your users. Don't prototype in abstraction. Don't prototype in an ivory tower miles and miles away from your customer. That's what Segway did, and they were a big failure because of it. Despite all of their engineering prowess, they didn't test with users, but you can. So an early stage sort of diagnostic prototype would be asking people to walk you through the steps of the most stressful part of a mortgage. I'm going to focus on financial services and mortgages so that you can kind of understand some examples that we might use. You might say, you've got a problem with your mortgage application and you have to call the call center. That's more of a role play than an interview. Another favorite of mine, and I just recently did a lot of these, which is card sorting. And this is where you can ask people to prioritize and you can prototype what is the best or worst part of an experience. And this can yield lots of very early stage, what we call diagnostic insights. So this is how you can prototype things, get people into the direct experience, interacting and talking about the sort of the pains and the gains they have with a potential new product or service. That's number one when we talk about the types of prototyping. Number two, an interactive prototype. This is where we start going for a moment or an interaction. We're not going to go for the whole product journey yet. We're just going to go for an interaction. So it might be just a transaction. Let's say, for example, you want to receive something from your bank. Maybe you want to transfer something to another customer at a bank. Maybe even you have 5 posters announcing a new banking app. Test them with different propositions, different pains and gains, see which one works. Or maybe what you could do is try some different ways of sort of role-playing out customer support or interfaces for customer support. Okay, so that's diagnostic. Then there's interaction. Those are the two first parts of prototyping. The third part is the journey. Now, the journey, this is where you go, for example, if you were to take a banking app, do the whole onboarding of a new customer, a loan application feature, or you might pull everything together. Onboarding, getting a loan, checking your balance, upsell, cross-sell of new products. That would be a journey-based prototype. So these are 3 wildly different types of prototypes done at different stage of searching for product fit. But hopefully what you can see here is at your hands, you can do a diagnostic prototype, just a prototype around an interaction, a moment, or you might go after an entire journey. Now, what's really interesting is you can take 3 different shapes, forms, tools, and media to each of these. For a diagnostic one, you might just use stickies on a wall. When you want to create a moment or an interaction, you could sketch it, maybe on paper, maybe even just put it on a whiteboard. You don't have to build a digital prototype. And of course, once you get into more of a journey-based prototype, you can use digital as well. Interesting thing is if you stay up the left-hand side here, you can be super quick. You can prototype a lot. And the reason that you want to prototype a lot is you learn more. So I would always start from the left and move my way across to the right. So there you have it, 3 types of prototype. So let's summarize a bit here. Prototyping is a powerful tool to test and validate an idea. It could be for a product or a service. It could be digital or analog. And it's the best way to learn of this idea of, does your product actually solve a problem that your user has? And as I said earlier, all of your testing should be with users. So now we're going to give you a chance to evaluate where you're at and are you doing rapid prototyping well? And there could be a lot to learn for you here. Maybe it's the whole piece. Maybe there are just certain things that you've been struggling with rapid prototyping. Let's dig in. Okay. So what is this formula for the basic things we need to check to evaluate if we're doing prototyping correctly? First thing that is really important is you should be testing with users. Second thing is you need to be giving them a task. And so you need to ask yourself, have I set a task for the user? So you want to find out how much you can borrow from an online, from a mortgage. I want you to find out. So here's an example of one. I want you to find out how much you could borrow on a mortgage via an online calculator. So now that's really interesting because you're asking them a very specific question, like, tell me the number. So you've given them that task and you'll see why this is really helpful. Then you give them the context. It's the where, who, why, what, where, all of those, all the W's. So you might have to tell them it's 9 a.m. You only have 30 minutes. You're at home and you're on your phone. Okay. Really important. So hopefully then your prototype matches to that. Have you tested the use case before testing with the user? So you should do a few run throughs. Do we have the materials to make changes in real time? Because the whole point of doing this is you learn. If you learn, you're going to change and improve your product. So can you actually make an update after one round of testing? And here's a really simple, but man, this one always comes up. Have you actually confirmed that the users will attend the testing? It's important for you. It might not be as important for them. So make sure you confirm on the day that they're coming. Do all of these things. Give them a task, set the context, have a great prototype, and you will create the direct experience. This means people will really give you quality feedback because they're going to imagine what it's like to use the app. They're going to be immersed in it. They're going to give feedback like it's a finished product. So some of the things you can do there is ask them to do a voiceover while they're going through it. Something I find myself doing a bit is saying, hey, perform the task like I'm not here. And, throughout this process, measure their ability to complete the task. This idea of task completion or task success or measuring success rate, some people call it, really huge if you want to have successful prototyping. So what's the science behind all of this? Well, this is a really important point that I want to touch on, is you don't need the full real product to give feedback. You can do it with a light prototype, a sketch or a version of the prototype. And the science behind this is based on some MRI scans that were done on the human brain when looking at images. And here's the story. Simple line drawings can capture the essence of a beach or a mountain just as well as a photograph would. And what I'm doing here on the right-hand side is I'm showing you some of the test material that was used by Ohio University in this complete study. And I put the credit down here for the study so that you can reference it and Google it if you want. But even when they removed 75% of the pixels from the image, people were still able to determine better than chance what the subject matter was. So our brain doesn't need 100% of the pixels, 100% of the data to work out the image. And this translates directly into prototyping. The user doesn't need 100% finished product with a light prototype that can still generate visceral, intuitive responses that will help you know, do you have a good product? Are you helping solve a problem? Is this worth building? Okay, so let's look at the habits and the things that you can do every single day to build a great prototype. 1, it's all about being curious. 2, be creative, be divergent, try different ways. 3, be super critical about what you're going to test first. 4, be really productive. Make sure you've got lots of materials and you're ready to go. Get ready to build and then test away. Now let's break each of these down. The understanding piece is when you're working with users is you need to be empathetic, be curious to understand what's the real problem, what are the pains they experience and gains they experience when they're trying to get a job done. So you can do all sorts of activities to do that. You can be a fly on the wall, do those interviews. Plenty here for you to get you inspired. The second one is the ideation. Then once you have that first data from the understanding, ask questions like, what if? How might we? What needs to be true? Really try and think of some different ways into building the product. So out of the 5 habits, the first are understand and ideate. Next one is to decide. Once you've got a bunch of ideas, you need to make something. You should have a bias towards action. So you should ask yourself, what's going to have the most impact? What's going to be quick to make? Find a way to get yourself into action. Don't be thinking and chatting for hours upon hours. Get into action. Build something. And when you build, you can build posters, storyboards, journey maps, content, single features, whole journeys. Make sure that you've got all of those materials ready to go and that you're ready to update those, because over time, as you test, this will change. Now, that talks about testing. Now, we talked about creating the scenario, making sure we create the direct experience using task-based. A last one, when you're really learning from these tests, is once you get a real comprehensive bunch of really good feedback to your product and to your testing, you can ask a user that's done the experience to actually present the product to a brand new tester. So what you get to see is user-to-user advocacy. This is very good to understand how people might share your product, the value they see in your product. So there you have it, 5 habits: understand, ideate, decide, build, and test. You can do all of these and you're going to have a great prototype. 2 books that I really recommend if you want to go deeper on this. The first of which is Inspired by Marty Kagan. Huge product guru, covers a lot more than just prototyping, but he talks about how to create tech products that customers love. So check that out, Inspired by Marty Kagan. The other book that I want to point out to you is Prototyping for Designers by McElroy. This one's a bit more specific to digital and physical products and their prototyping. Again, this one's a bit more niche, but if you're really getting into prototyping, that will help you along the way. So there you have it. We have done the study of rapid prototyping. Now it's your turn to have a go, to dig in, to explore, to test and learn, and to try. And if you're really fascinated by this idea of rapid prototyping, or the fact that it's part of over 60 things that successful people do, and head to moonshots.io where you can discover the Moonshots model, where you can discover what it takes to be the best version of yourself. Okay, that's a wrap.